This is something that really bothered me about ballet. It felt really restricting for me. You're totally dependent on the company's schedule. I should quit dancing professionally. It was just nothing in ballet that I could look forward to. Drinking like 8 painkillers a day. It's the identity that's so hard to let go. Felt like a huge part of me died. Alright guys, so I have actually attempted to make this video many times already, but each time I tried to make it, I pretty much failed because of how difficult it is for me to talk about this. But today I am giving it one last chance since as of today, it is actually 1 year since I had my last performance where I quit dancing professionally, and I think I am finally at the point where I can comfortably explain to you guys why I quit dancing ballet. So in this video, I want to share with you my story and also the thought process behind this decision. So we're gonna talk a little bit about some of the main factors like the fear of leaving ballet after dancing for 20 years, the fear of losing the identity of being a ballerina, which we all work so hard to establish as dancers, the fear that nobody will probably care about what I have to say if I lose this prestigious badge of, being a dancer, the fact that I struggled with depression, nihilism, and chronic back pain, and all that kind of fun stuff. Actually, it's not fun, but also just overall thoughts about the ballet industry as a whole. And I feel like as much as this video is really hard for me to make, I think it's worth sharing my story if it helps even one person. Maybe, I don't know, you are at the crossroads of making a big career decision yourself. So I hope this video gives you a little bit of courage. If you're new here, I am Sayaka and I am a Harvard graduate ballerina turned entrepreneur. Alright, so first of all, I want to begin by just saying that as a dancer, I was enormously privileged to do what I love for a living. Most people have jobs, not career. The definition of a job is an activity that you get paid for because you wouldn't do it voluntarily. Very few people are getting paid for doing something that feels to them like their calling. Very few people can derive meaning and purpose from their day-to-day jobs sitting in an office. So the very fact that I, as a dancer, was able to make a living by doing something I love, like dance all day and call it work, was a huge privilege already. But that being said, I've also come to realize throughout my career that human motivation is actually a very complex thing, and moreover, passion can change over time. And so I want to tell you a little bit about my story. I grew up in Japan, and by the age of 3, I was already doing the split. So when I started ballet at the age of 6, I was already in love with ballet. Like at school, I would always tell my friends that I would become a ballerina one day, but it wasn't like I was talented. I was actually the worst student in my class. And so many people made fun of me and laughed at me. But to me, that all didn't matter because when I had ballet, it felt like the entire world just disappeared and like nothing else mattered. I felt safe with ballet. And so during my teenage years, I focused obsessively on ballet and nothing else. Like I literally traveled across oceans to learn ballet since 13. And so growing up, I had to sacrifice everything, my country, my education, time spent with friends, family, etc. And when I finally graduated from ballet school at the age of 17, I thought I could finally make it and become a professional now. But the thing was, there was no company in Europe that would hire me because I was like way too young and way too short to be a corps de ballet member. And I had like basically no experience as a soloist, so there was no way I could become a soloist like directly, right? But so then there was this one company that offered me a contract, and not just like any contract, but like a principal contract, which was like, at that time I was like, whoa, this is amazing. But the thing was, this company was in Yakutsk, which was basically in East Siberia in Russia. But because I was so determined to become a ballerina, I was willing to go through like any conditions and go to any country that gave me an opportunity to dance. Like this is how hungry I was. I was so determined to kill it in ballet. Like there was no plan B. It was just like either I succeed or I succeed. There was just no way that I was not going to be a dancer. And so just like that, I dance in countries like Turkey, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Poland, and these are all very beautiful countries, but they're also very random countries if you think about it, right? Apart from extreme weather conditions like I lived in East Russia, I was also caught up in situations like the failed military coup d'etat in Istanbul and also the bombings of the Ataturk airport in 2016. But to me, none of that life-threatening situation even mattered because the only thing that really mattered to me was ballet and having a career as a dancer. And so after spending like 4 years in these countries, I was eventually able to relocate to Germany then, where I finally had a bit of security and safety and, just some space to breathe, right? And I had a great time building my career. I danced like a lot of ballets that I really dreamed about. I worked with a lot of prominent choreographers. Like I was privileged to dance a lot of solo roles, a lot of even principal roles. And so I was like really living my dream, I was like, one day I'm gonna become a ballerina in Germany and I'm gonna dance all these great ballets. And I was doing that myself. That was like a dream come true for me. But then as the years went by, I started to notice that I wasn't as happy as I expected myself to be. I somehow started to feel really stuck. And up until now, there was all this, thrill. But when I made it, I started to feel all of a sudden like really unexcited about my work. And so I would wake up and I feel really tired and not really want to go to work. And I got to a point where I felt like there was just nothing in ballet that I could look forward to. And because I wasn't feeling fulfilled with my dream job, I started to get like really upset, really depressed and nihilistic as well. And what really sucked was that these feelings then translated into chronic back pain. So at that moment, like I was at one point just drinking like 8 painkillers a day just to get by. I was on sick leave for months and months while my colleagues had to cover for me, so I felt horrible about myself. And trust me, when you're at home all the time just thinking about what a terrible and lazy person you are for being injured, it really makes depression even worse. So I was kind of like caught up in this toxic spiral, and I knew I had to make a change, but I didn't know how to get out. And then just as I was going through all of this, I actually then got a job offer from my current company as a manager, more specifically a manager for sponsoring and fundraising. So basically, dealing with corporate partnerships and private donors and, all that kind of fun stuff. And so from that day that I got that job offer to the moment I had to take my last bow on stage, I basically only had like 2 weeks to decide. And during those 2 weeks were like the weirdest time of my life because I was in this like weird transitional phase, and it honestly felt like I was sentenced to death. Yeah, I can't put it in a better way. It just felt like, Sayaka, you're no longer gonna be a dancer anymore. You're gonna like work in an office, and this literally felt to me like death sentence. But long story short, I did end up having my last performance on October 23rd, 2022. Yeah, just super emotional. I don't even want to get into it. Yeah. My last performance was Romeo and Juliet by Jean-Christophe Maillot, and we had a very nice celebration at the very end of the performance, which was very, very bittersweet, and I don't even want to think about it because it just like makes me want to cry. But yeah, life goes on, and I started my new job a few days later. So that is my story. And so what I learned from this experience is that it is really the journey that counts, not the destination. It sounds so cliche, but this is literally what happened to me. During all those years that I was trying to make it and I was like climbing up every like step, I was actually enjoying it. But as soon as I got to the destination, that's when things just started not working out, because I was like, wait a minute, I got here and like, where do I go now? So I learned much more from the journey of going through all these hardships and the challenges than from the dream life that I was having at the destination. So that was really revealing. Right, so part 2 of this video is my thought process behind this decision to leave. So when I was deciding whether to stay in ballet or not, I went back to the roots and asked myself, first of all, what is the purpose of work? And the way I see it, there are probably 5 things that we work for. That's money, passion, helping people, purpose, and status. And so thinking about these 5 different factors separately eventually led me to understand why it was best for me to leave. And so if you're going through a career transition, I think that some of this stuff will help you or inspire you, or at least I hope so. So let's go one by one. Money. So personally speaking, in all the years that I have danced, I have never met a single person who went into ballet for the money. Dancers often have very little financial security because they are often on very short-term guest contracts hired per production, or even if you're lucky enough to land a full-time position in a company, the money is all right, but honestly not incredible if you consider the amount of specialized training that you have to go through for so many years. So if people were motivated by money, they would have chosen to be a doctor or lawyer or something. And in my case, I was lucky enough to have a full-time position in which I had a lot of financial security, and I will admit I also couldn't get easily fired because unless something drastic happened, my contract would just automatically extend every year. So I admit that I was in a very privileged situation as a dancer. But on the other hand, if I were to consider what I could potentially be earning as a Harvard graduate elsewhere in other industries like business or finance, money was definitely not a factor in staying in ballet. So we can cross that one out. Now the next one is passion. I think it's safe to say that most dancers get into ballet for the passion. Without passion, you cannot become a very good dancer because dance is not only about talent, you need to have an extraordinary level of commitment and dedication because ballet is pretty much a lifestyle. You go through many physical hours of training, you have to change your daily habits, eating habits, your routines, etc. You also need to sacrifice the majority of your childhood to go through professional ballet school, which usually means you need to leave your family or country at a very young age, which is not very easy if you're not passionate about the subject. So ballet is definitely one of those professions where you need to be 120% committed. And again, in my case, passion was definitely the reason why I initially got into ballet, as I mentioned earlier, but as I achieved more and more in ballet, I got to a point where there was nothing I could look forward to in ballet anymore. So the passion aspect of the components was kind of falling apart. And so I almost saw it as a disservice for not being able to commit 100% into the art form. I got way too curious about different things at one point. I was sure I was going to Harvard and I was learning about all these other topics, and I was also very curious about business and building up my business as well. But you want to see a dancer on stage who's full-heartedly committed to her profession rather than half in, right? So passion for me was then no longer a factor. The third one is helping people and making a positive impact on society. So this is something that really bothered me about ballet. So as a dancer, sure, you're helping people by enriching people's lives and culture and inspiring people through the art form and all that kind of stuff. But, that would be really rewarding if dancers actually had direct interaction with people in the audience. But that was so rarely the case. We had so little contact with people in the audience that sometimes I really even wondered whether all the work that we were doing was worth it. Because we got like no feedback from actual audiences. And I'm not saying that like art is unimportant. It's very important. Art and culture have always been what enriches our lives. They also play a huge role in driving economic success and making cities just attractive to live in. But the impact just feels so indirect sometimes because you don't have a lot of chances to talk to these people. And personally for me, I am somebody who really likes to be close to the audience. You know, I really want to hear what the audience has to say, how they perceive our performance, what they liked, what they didn't like, you know, and things like that. Because in the end, I think that's what really counts. Like, sure, I dance because I enjoy it myself, but if I just only do things because I enjoy it myself, I feel like that's a little selfish, and I want the people who actually come and, you know, buy our tickets and watch these performances, you know, whether it's Nutcracker or Swan Lake with their families, you know, I want them to enjoy and have a really nice evening. I don't really know whether they had a nice evening because I don't even get to hear from them. And so this is something that I was really missing from the traditional form of ballet. And this is kind of like the reason why I started social media in the first place, because this is a way I can directly communicate with people. For example, this has nothing to do with ballet, but when I posted a video of me talking at Harvard about my personal struggles with depression and nihilism and stuff like that, I got comments from people who went through the same thing, saying how much that video actually helped them. And that's the same thing with like Instagram. I get direct connection with these people. And that's a very small example where I was like, whoa, like it's actually refreshing to have a direct impact on people's lives in a way that I could never have done as a professional dancer, or in the traditional form at least. The fourth one is deriving purpose and meaning. And this has a lot to do with your values and beliefs, which, you know, I don't want to get into too much because I don't want this video to get too long. But if you're interested, you can watch my other video here, somewhere around here. But as we saw, one of my values was helping people, which would give me purpose and meaning. But for me, personally, that wasn't fulfilled. There were also just other things like, you know, the lack of autonomy and, like, more specifically, the inflexibility of time. So as dancers, you're totally dependent on the company's schedule. You are told when and where to be at all times. You can't make independent decisions for yourself regarding time and schedule. This may sound horrible, but you are a product of the company. And I'm not talking about any specific company, because all the companies that I've worked at were just like really, really incredible. But this is just the nature of how ballet is, you know, because ballet is kind of like a team sport, if you will. Okay, it's not a sport, my bad, but it is very team-oriented. You get into one studio and rehearse with many different people. And if one person is missing, then it affects the entire group. So it is basically a very team-oriented thing. So like for me personally, this lack of autonomy was driving me crazy. It felt like really restricting for me, especially because like at that time I was concentrating on my Harvard degree and, you know, my business, as I said. So this created a sense of like dependency where my life revolved around the company and not vice versa. And the last one is, in my opinion, the trickiest one. It's social status associated with a job. So a lot of people choose certain careers not only for financial reasons or any of the other stuff that we just mentioned, but rather to gain respect and a sense of prestige in society. I think that most dancers, including myself, wouldn't want to admit this, but there is a certain comfort about being a professional dancer. Like, I've experienced this myself. People treat you in a very special way as soon as they hear that you're a dancer, because like it's quite special, right? Like very few people actually make it to become professional dancers, which makes the job quite prestigious and special in a way. So we grow up always telling people that we're professional dancers, and so it becomes a big part of our identity, right? And this identity as a dancer becomes a core part of our self-concept, And I think that's why it's so hard to let go of this identity as a dancer. Everybody I know who was a dancer says this. It's the identity that's so hard to let go. And then you start to think like, I'll probably be a nobody if I don't dance. Nobody will care about what I have to say anymore. So it was for me this fear of letting go of a big part of my identity that I personally struggled with the most. And so when I quit, I really literally felt like a huge part of me died. I think there's this quote by Martha Graham that says, "A dancer dies twice, once when they stop dancing, and the first death is more painful." But so as painful as this all is, you can see why it didn't really make sense for me to stay in ballet anymore. And so I already knew in my gut and also rationally that I should quit dancing professionally. And the only thing that was really holding me back was losing the identity of being a dancer. I was really struggling to let go of my attachments. But so when I was going through all of this, there were 3 concepts, I believe, that really helped me to let go and move on. And I want to share them with you, of course. So the first concept that really helped me move on was a quote from Japanese Zen Buddhism called Shogyo Mujo, which basically means that nothing in life is permanent and that we are only heading towards one direction, which is death. And as harsh as this sounds, for me it was really a wake-up call that said, people are not immortal. We don't have time. We don't get younger. We get older. It's like a stream of water. It only goes in one direction. And so rather than, resisting this natural flow of change, we should accept this impermanence and let go of our attachments because time moves on and there is no time to waste. The second concept was just plain research that basically said performance decline is inevitable and that on average, peak performance starts declining 20 years into a career, especially for creative professionals and athletes. And it was so interesting because I started ballet when I was 6 years old, and exactly 20 years later, so when I was 26, was when my career started to change, I was considering quitting. And this sort of helped me accept the reality of what I was going through. It's kind of like, oh yeah, there is evidence and it's not just me, it's kind of a normal thing. And of course I could resist it and dance as long as possible. But then it would go against this other principle that I'm gonna mention now, because I would be losing this time that I could be building another second career. Which leads me to the third concept that helped me move on, that had to do with basic economic concepts. So in economics, we have something called the opportunity cost, which is what you basically give up when you choose one option over another. And there is also something called the marginal benefit, which is the additional satisfaction you receive from something. So in the case of what I was going through, I realized that the opportunity cost outweighs the marginal benefit of staying in dance, which basically means, in fancy words, every day I spent in ballet meant a lost day I could have spent starting a new career. And this realization was huge. I realized that the more time I spent in ballet unhappy, the more difficult it would get later on to start entirely new in another field. And as soon as I realized this, I was like, wow, I know what I need to do. And the answer is just so clear. Yeah. Now looking back, it's been 1 year and I asked myself, was it really the right choice? And I would really say absolutely yes. Do I have any regrets? No. I think if anything, I regret the fact that I didn't quit sooner, as soon as I felt unhappy. Because I stayed in ballet for another year or so, being really unhappy. But I think that had it not been for that extra year of being really unhappy in ballet, I would probably have always questioned myself whether my choice was right. And actually, as a final touch to this video, I want to share with you what I wrote in my notebook on the day I had my last bow. I wrote, "The day has come. Today is my last performance as a ballerina. I knew this day would come one day, but I never thought that it would come like this. Ever since the age of 3, I have been doing the splits. Everywhere I went, the language of ballet was universal. Every country I landed in, there was a studio for me to go to and ballet for me to dance. Ballet has been the one thing that has remained consistent in my life. But somewhere along the way, I started to take this consistent presence of ballet in my life for granted. I fell out of love with ballet. It feels like a marriage where you start taking each other for granted because you see each other too often every day. I started wanting to explore my own identity outside of this thing called ballet. My ambitions wanted to prove that ballet doesn't define me, that I am more than ballet. Ballet has become so autopilot now that I question whether I have any feelings for ballet left at all. But I still cry and cry because I feel it's too early to let go. There is a deep sadness in my heart to realize that nothing in life is permanent. The bright green leaves eventually decay and fall to the ground. The classmates that you go to school with eventually graduate and move on one day. The ambitions you once have eventually die. And the love and passion you thought would last forever eventually burn out." I don't know what to say. Just want to say thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting my career. And thank you for watching all my videos all the time. Thank you for your encouraging words. Ballet will always have a special place in my heart. But I feel like at this moment, it was the right thing to do. And so I just want to say thank you so much for listening to my story. And it is my hope that my personal career transition / story gives you the courage or inspiration to make a big change for your life as well. Because life is just too short to waste even a single day. And I feel like we should just stay true to ourselves at that very moment and let go of our attachments. Thank you very much. And I also just want to say, this is my personal story, my personal opinions about how I felt about ballet, and I'm really sorry if I offended anybody. By no means do I want to criticize ballet. I love ballet still, but it just got really, really hard for me to dance at one point, and I'm really happy right now with my new life. So I'm also just really excited about what's going to happen in the future. So yeah, thank you for watching, and thank you for your continuous support as well. All right, see you guys. Good night. Bye bye.